Hey guys, what's up? Fearless Front out here in the garage today. Doing a little analysis of the racing lawnmower go-kart creation that I've built over the past year and a half. Just basically going to go over it and see how it held up after its first ride, because I'm sure bolts loosened and things moved around, and we're just going to kind of check things up and see how it's going. My first impressions, I could tell it definitely has a lot more power. However, when I got up into about 4,000 to 5,000 RPMs, especially going up hills or just driving in general, it felt like if I wasn't going downhill, I wasn't getting all the RPMs out of the motor I could be. But other than that, everything performed great. Like I said, we're going to go over it and see what things have loosened up, what's moved around. I've got to do a little bit of work to it. I'm actually going to drop the tooth on the front sprocket on the torque converter. I'm going to go from a 10-tooth sprocket to a 9-tooth sprocket. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I was actually feeling like, since the RPMs weren't making it all the way up, that actually if I gear it down, it will help it go a little faster, believe it or not, because it'll allow it to get higher up into the RPMs and maybe pull a little harder in the top end as well as the low end. So it's going to be faster all around once I do this. But let's get started on that. Let's do a little analysis, see how this thing held up, and we'll pretty much go from there. So up front, everything seems like it's still really good. All the bolts for the hood are still very tight. Everything still seems like it's in place pretty well. This wheel is a little loose. You can see that. And that's just going to mean I have to tighten that big center bolt a little bit more. And these kingpin bolts all held up great. So did the tie rod bolts. This wheel is a tiny bit loose, but not nearly as bad as the other side. So I'll tighten both these up a little bit. In the drivetrain, everything held up great. I didn't hear any funny noises or anything, and actually this whole setup, this wheel, the rear axle, everything now spins better than it ever has, just really effortlessly, I guess is what I mean. That means basically all of these bearings in the torque converter and the rear axle bearings and probably even the chain and this idler sprocket here are all starting to finally break in and kind of loosen up. So that's probably affecting my top speed and acceleration as well, the fact that absolutely none of these bearings as well as the motor aren't really broken in yet. But besides that, everything else seems like it held up really well. All the nuts and bolts are still in place. I got the shields pulled off there so you can see all that stuff, obviously. Yeah, this thing held up great so far. I drove it for probably 30 minutes and really no complaints. But as you guys know, with anything, especially with me, there's always room for improvement. So let's talk about changing that front sprocket out and maybe squeezing a few more miles an hour and probably some better acceleration out of this thing as well. So on this go-kart I actually have 3 sprockets. The one in the center absolutely does not matter. That is just an idler sprocket there to keep tension on the chain. The rear sprocket, that's a 36 tooth, and I considered increasing the size of that to like a 40 tooth, but I could not because I could not find a 40 tooth sprocket. It's amazing. I can find 45 and I can find 36, but I can't find anything in between that fits a 40-41 pitch chain. So I'm going to stick with the 36, and actually what I did was I looked online and you can actually get new front sprockets for these torque converters. Right now I have a 10 tooth on there. You can't actually see the sprocket, but you can see the chain going around the sprocket. And what that will do, by dropping that one tooth from the 10 tooth to the 9 tooth, will basically give me the same exact ratio as if I was to increase this to a 40 tooth sprocket. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. So I'm going to go ahead and taunt you with my new BMI Karts and Supplies catalog. But this is where I order most of my parts. And right here they have all the Comet clutch, all the sets for everything to do with the Comet torque converters, the belts, everything. What's interesting is right here they have the replacement sprocket, 5/8 inside diameter, which is what most of us have. And they have them for 41 and 35. Most of them come with a 10 tooth if you're a 41, so I ordered the 9 tooth. Wasn't that expensive. Here we have it, right in my hand. So unfortunately for me, to change that one little sprocket, which is back in there behind everything as we discussed earlier, I have to take this entire driven pulley off, and I'm not even sure I can do that entirely with this whole thing installed in the go-kart. So I might actually have to take the whole torque converter unit completely off, which means I have to take the chain completely off and all that crap. And once I drop a tooth, the chain's going to actually be a little loose, So I might either have to slide the motor forward a little bit or slide the motor backwards and cut another link out of the chain and shorten it a little bit, but we'll see. So there's the progress. Torque converter is removed, chains removed, wheels just freewheeling right now. And over here we've got the torque converter. I've already loosened this bolt while it was attached to the engine because it makes it a lot easier. And right in there you can see our sprocket that we've got to change. We've got our new one right here. What we're going to do is take this bolt completely off and slide this whole pulley system off. Then the sprocket slides out and we slide the new one on. Here we have our two sprockets. This being the 9-tooth right here, and this is the 10. It's not much difference, but one more tooth makes quite a difference in the gearing. Make sure you put your keyways back in. Tighten that up more once it's back on the motor. But that's it. We just swapped it. Now I have a 9-tooth sprocket instead of the original 10-tooth. So the torque converter is bolted back into place. We got the mounting bolts torqued down, and we got the pulley all bolted down and put together, and we get the chain run, and we've even got the spring hooked up. And I did have to slide the motor forward about a half an inch to get the slack out from the chain. There was a little too much. But no big deal, at least I didn't have to drop a link. That was good. But I gotta finish putting it together now, put the driver pulley on, put the belt on, and all the guards and stuff, and pretty much a done deal. There we have it. We're all reassembled. All the nice shiny aluminum is back in place, all the guards. Ow. Everything is spinning nicely. The chain is not binding. Still have some room there, as you can see on both sides. Man, does that thing ever sit close to that pulley and that backing plate. I mean, it's a fine balance of almost hitting both things and getting the engine mounted in line perfectly and having the sprockets all lined up perfectly to get this thing to sit perfectly straight. So that's pretty much it for this one. I can't wait to take this thing out and ride it again. I mean, it was pretty fast before, but now it should be able to reach more of a top speed, which is just going to be insane. So keep a lookout for that video. And until then, we'll see you guys later.